So in any case, let me kick this off. Many of you have heard about the Air Force Accelerator, Air Force Accelerator powered by Techstars. I'm the managing director. The program runs in Boston. This is our third year. We're now in week 5 of our third cohort. Just a little about Techstars. Techstars, for those of you who have not heard of us before, the worldwide network that helps entrepreneurs succeed. We run about 50 accelerators around the world. We recruit thousands of companies from around the world. Thousands of companies around the world to our accelerator programs every year. We select 500 or so of those companies, 10 per cohort. We run a 13-week boot camp, if you will, or highly compressed business school for startup companies. We're a seed level venture capitalist, so we give each company some money, and then we take some equity in return. Approximately half of our programs around the world are funded by large corporate entities. These include Barclays Bank, which runs 3 fintech accelerators with Techstars, MetLife, which runs an insurance tech accelerator with us, Amazon runs an Alexa accelerator with us, Collier's Property runs a property tech accelerator, and the U.S. Air Force now runs 3 accelerators with Techstars. Mine was the first, the Air Force Accelerator powered by Techstars here in Boston. There's the Techstars Starburst Space Accelerator in Los Angeles, run by my colleague Matt Kozlov. And then there's the newest Allied Space Accelerator, which is a virtual program run by my colleague Jonathan Fensky, who is also on the call today. As I mentioned, we're in our 3rd cohort. Every cohort starting in 2018 has 10 companies. We open up selection criteria around the world and pick the top 10 companies we think have the best dual-use technology or product that both has a very strong commercial application, a commercial potential, as well as a valid DoD use case. How we pick companies, there's a lot of place to go with this conversation. How we pick companies, Techstars usually focuses on founders, high quality team that can actually pull it off, as we think. The idea also in our case has to be good, though the rest of the Techstars programs will make the claim that the ideas and the product is kind of secondary if you can have a successful team that can pull off starting and growing and successfully running a company. That's more important than the actual idea. So for a program like ours, like the vertical focused programs, like the Space Accelerator or my Accelerator or the Allied Accelerator, we'll look at both. We need to have a viable company that has a pretty good idea, but the founding team is critical. So we give them a little bit of money, we take a little bit of equity, and then we nurture the companies through. And after they graduate, Techstars has a venture capital fund, and we will invest in the later stages of the company if they're doing very well. I am going to stop right here, and then I'm going to introduce my colleague, Jonathan Fensky, who will chat for a second about his program, the Allied Space Accelerator program, which is in the recruiting mode right now. So if anybody's on this phone who's a startup and thinks that they have a good company that might be useful for Jonathan, I would encourage you to apply. But Jonathan, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Warren. Hopefully everybody can hear me okay. My program is in many ways related to our other space-focused accelerators or tech-focused accelerators, but has a new and unique, interesting twist, which is it's actually looking at procurement and technologies and products across borders. In this case, we're looking at Europe and the US primarily, and recruiting companies from multiple geographies and NATO allied nations, which is a pretty cool opportunity. I happen to be a space scientist by training and have worked in aerospace and dual use technologies in national labs and in government for about 15 years. So having the opportunity to help entrepreneurs to be successful in this challenging domain where you have multiple stakeholders that have really, really hard problems is it's a fun thing to be part of, and been very lucky to work, with Steve and with AFWERX and with SMC and other folks on trying to figure this out. As Warren mentioned, we're in recruiting mode, which means, we're starting to run this program for the first time, but we are seeing a lot of companies that have more maturity. As you might imagine, as Warren pointed out, in a vertical specific program, we're really targeting where we can fill gaps in the architecture and understand how to better serve the customer base and build these strong scalable businesses that can essentially take money from different customer bases and deliver a lot of value. I have to go into more detail about how we work with various entities and about the companies I'm looking for, but just that's some general background on this new program.
Thanks a lot, Jonathan. So if anybody's interested in Jonathan's program, you can ask him questions on this call or contact him later. I'd now like to introduce our key corporate sponsor. Our Accelerator program here in Boston is not just sponsored by the U.S. Air Force. We have a great corporate partner who assists with all aspects of the operation of the accelerators and the helping companies win government programs and get them into product lines and programs for the government. It's BAE Systems, located in Nashua, New Hampshire. The FAST Labs in particular, it's BAE Systems FAST Labs. And if Francesca can unmute herself and give a little background introduction in particular, Francesca, if you might focus on the issue of why BAE does this, exactly what you expect to get out of it, and why we've partnered with Techstars and the Air Force on this effort. Francesca, you're muted. We can't hear you. Okay, Francesca, for some reason we can't hear you. I'm going to suggest you either restart your WebEx, and we'll move over to Steve until you get yourself reconnected again, and then just interrupt when you're back online. So why don't we shift over to Major Select Steve Lauver, who's head of all accelerators at AFWERX. So Steve, maybe you can tell us a little bit about what AFWERX is, what the accelerators program is, and why you reached out to Techstars and partnered with us on this effort.
Yeah, absolutely. So first off, you hear me okay?
You need to be a little louder. Can you raise your microphone or?
You got me now? How's that?
We can hear you, Steve.
Okay, good. Awesome. Well, thanks everybody again for joining this room. Warren, thank you so much for kind of running this. Jonathan, as well. It's good to see you again. So yeah, bottom line from the Air Force perspective, why are we doing this? I think what it comes down to is we want the brightest minds in the world working on problems that are also relevant to the Air Force in some way, right? So we recognize that if we're going to maintain our edge, we need to widen the funnel to a point the brightest people that are out there are choosing to work with the Air Force, and they have some kind of mechanism by which they can do that. Now, the reality is that hasn't always been easy, right? So I think, Dr. Roper alluded to this a little bit earlier today, that sometimes it is challenging to work with us. And in fact, sometimes you need to hire someone entirely new who is an expert in navigating the bureaucracy that is the Department of Defense. And so when we first set out on this journey with Warren 3 years ago and with Techstars, one of the value propositions that we saw them bring to us, and one of the reasons we did it, was to say, we don't know what we don't know, and we don't know what is the most effective way to work with startups and venture. And also, we kind of had a branding issue that we had to overcome, right? So we had this history of some challenges to working with the Air Force. If we were going to change all those things, that's wonderful. And I think we've successfully reversed, any negative sentiment, or at least a lot of it, as evidenced by the number of people applying to our various programs. But in the beginning, at least, it absolutely was very important to partner with a company that did this for a living, that had trust in the ecosystem, and also had a network through which we can kind of evangelize some of these things. And Techstars was one of those, was a good partner in that, to that end, right? So when we first got with them, this was, hey, we think it's a great idea to potentially get more and better companies, especially startups, coming to work with the DoD. And oh, by the way, it's not just them convincing companies to come work with us. It's also taking a hard look at ourselves and saying, based on this experience, what things do we need to change about ourselves? And that has influenced very heavily some of the things that you've seen in Air Force Ventures. So some of the rules around the SIBR program and things like that. So that's that piece. That's kind of the initial why. We've obviously grown over time. So we've run 3 programs now. Each of these has 10 companies that come to work with us. One thing that is kind of become this unique value proposition for the accelerator over time, and I like to reference this in terms of how it fits into Air Force Ventures as well, because we spent the whole day going over the phase 1s and the phase 2s and all these different things. The reality is a lot of times we want to work with startup companies, but maybe they're not quite mature enough yet to be able to survive us or work effectively with us, right? And in those cases, they might not even be ready for a phase one SIVR, one of those small bets that Dr. Roper talked about. And I've seen this in a number of cases over the last 3 years where a company who is in the accelerator cohort, through that process over those 3 months, essentially gets to the point at which they are ready to work with us and they've established the commercial traction to do so. And this is a good lead in that we do not want to pull companies off of their commercial track. In fact, that is a failure to us if we see a company pull them completely DoD and then they lose any market they could have had on the commercial side. So this is really an exercise in us learning to work hand in hand and to not only help our means, like get solutions to our problems, but also help the company succeed commercially. And that really is an art. It's not just a science. And I think that that in this means, or to that end, Techstars has kind of been an artist in helping to do that. So anyway, that's some of the high level intent of the program. It's been really great over the last 3 years. And I'd say, you know, the quality and quantity of companies has just gone up. So really impressed with it.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Steve. Now, Francesca, are you up and running?
Well, can you hear me?
I can hear you. We can hear you. Okay, great.
Finally.
All right, over to you.
Challenge. I tried all different ways through phone, computer, so but I think we're on yet. So yeah, very quickly about BAE Systems and our participation to the program. So first of all, I don't know how much people know about BAE Systems, but we are one of the world's largest defense and aerospace company in the world, and we provide technologies for land, air, space, water, underwater, and cyber. So all different possibilities here. So our goal, and especially for my team, which is the tech scouting team that is part of the FAST Lab R&D group, is to work with the commercial market, commercial R&D, especially dual-use technology, to quickly fill our technology gaps, insert discriminating technologies in our complex systems. And the reason is that because this will enable implementing new mission capabilities to meet the needs of our customer. And we know we want to accelerate speed of innovation, so we want to do that quickly. So our strategy and the reason why we're part of Techstars is that we want to support the innovation ecosystem, create an innovation model around Boston and across the country. We want to introduce new business models, so ways of working with large prime contractors like us in a different way. And we want to leverage external budgets, so not necessarily acquiring companies, but actually working with companies. And our goal is actually do this left shift for suppliers. So basically, we want to help and support startups becoming our suppliers in the market. So this is the big idea. So what we have done, so what Techstars has been able to do was a phenomenal vehicle for us to create this strong defense innovation community in the Boston area. And so we work together with the government and the accelerators, so the commercial market, helping startups to understand what are the ways in which they can have their technology tilted in a way that can be used for defense applications. And so what we've done with almost all of the Techstars companies last year, the year before, and this year, we help the companies put together some proposals that define some statement of work that helps this company to improve or to increase their readiness to become suppliers for the defense market. And of course, you understand that when you have letters of support and direction from a prime contractor, that helps guiding the company into a market that can be really be implemented in the short term.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Francesca. So the message to everybody on the line is that the Air Force, Techstars, and BAE Systems are all conspiring is probably the wrong word, but we're all working together to reach out to non-traditional startup companies that theoretically would like to work with the Department of Defense, but have in the past been repulsed by the bureaucracy, whether it's Air Force bureaucracy and acquisition bureaucracy itself, or trying to work with a large corporate entity like BAE Systems. And we're all trying to make sure that the companies can operate and provide their products and services in a frictionless fashion, and also such that they don't have to become a defense contractor. They don't have to learn all the unique, hard to figure out contract mechanisms and financing and legal and all that kind of thing. They can remain who they are. They can remain commercial product companies, which is actually to the benefit of the Air Force, the DoD in general, because the product sales outside of the Department of Defense add to the R&D, the internal R&D that a company will put into a product, thereby relieving the Air Force or large defense contractors from shouldering the entire investment all on their own. As Steve has often said, there's many times more R&D investment coming internally from commercial product companies, plowing it back into their own products. There's no particular reason for the Department of Defense not to piggyback on that. So with that, I'm going to open the floor up to questions of any kind, and I'll see if I can broker them. Erin, do you want to broker the questions, or you'd like me to do it?
If you can see them, you could do it. Can you see the chat from guests to all panelists?
No, I cannot. I am looking at the. I see the Q&A. I see a question coming through on the Q&A, but not the chat.
We also have Marita on the line if you wanted to introduce her.
Yeah.
Okay, Marita, program manager, is also here. Everything working in the background. I can't see the chat, and I can see both Q&A and chat now.
Just look at all, Warren, right below it. It says all.
I have two little windows up, and I think I'm seeing everything. 19, yeah, it says 19. Okay. So we've got a question from the audience here. Is this program for companies that are aspiring to get into SBIR Phase 1, or also for companies that have already been selected for Phase 1? So that's an easy question. We've taken companies that have never heard of the SBIR program, and whereas most Techstars programs around the world are kind of finishing school for fundraising, as I call it, preps the company for their first round, whether it's a pre-seed or a seed round or an A round. In our particular three programs, mine, Jonathan's, and Matt Kozlov's, we do both. Prep the company for fundraising, but also prep them for bidding these SBIRs. So I've taken companies from companies that have never heard of the SBIR program, and I was the first to introduce them in the interview process, and I usually push them to bid a Phase 1 even before they've been accepted into the program. I push plenty of companies to bid on Phase 1s that don't get accepted in my program. I still push them to bid Phase 1s to see if they can't get some traction there. I have taken companies who've already won Phase 1s. I have already taken companies who've already won Phase 2s and have commercial product and market. So the benefits of going through an accelerator are sort of phase agnostic to SBIRs. Usually the companies are prepared to bid and win a Phase 1. My last round, 8 out of 10 of the companies won Phase 1s in their first shot. That's the first question. Let's see. On the Q&A side, looks like there's 20, but I can't see them all. Click on all. First question I see is, what level of fundings and percent equity do Techstars? Oh, I have a little slider on the side. Okay. What funding equity do Techstars spend? Windows, excuse me. There we go. All right. Let me just make sure I have the timing correct. Questions? There we go. All right. First question in the Q&A block: how is AFWERX working with Navy, Army, etc.? Our technology product solutions have the ability to be adapted for their platforms. I'm going to pass that over to Steve.
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. So there's a couple things here. First off is with the accelerator itself, we're actually going through this week something called Liaison Madness, where we bring in folks from the DoD, not just from the Air Force, to meet the companies in kind of a rapid style fashion. And what that does is lead to collisions that may ultimately lead to deal flow. Now, that's not restricted to Air Force by any means. I think there's been days where it's probably been majority, Navy, majority Army, and similar. So that's for the accelerator. When it comes to SBIR and Air Force Ventures, the reality is that we've actually formally extended this, at least the phase 1, beyond just the Air Force. So the last topic, 20.1, which the last cohort was just awarded. So we have some 300 plus companies that were just awarded their phase 1s. That was a joint topic. And so both the Army and the Navy, and actually NGA and NSIN, all signed on for this joint topic, such that it is becoming the front door, if you will, for a company to come work with anywhere in the DoD or federal government. It's kind of the intent. So we have those 4 players officially now. What happens is they get into the front door in phase 1. It's joint in nature. They can choose to go to Air Force or Navy or Army or NGA. They can go whatever route makes the most sense for them to phase 2 when the time comes, those medium bets that Dr. Lauver talked about. And so anyway, this is a formal thing. It took a lot of coordination with General Murray and then Hondo Gertz on the Navy side. So there's a lot of players that are involved with that, and we are always looking and actually accepting ideas to make that even better.
Okay, next question. It's going to be for Steve as well. Also, do all the various departments that do SBIR, STTR have plans to standardize terminology and how to do applications? We've had trouble keeping track because Army, Air Force, Navy, NETSA all have similar but different terms for the same thing, such as TABA. Steve, back.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, what we can't do is tell other agencies how to operate, right? So that's not something within our authority. But what we can do is very much publicize the things that have worked and the terminology that has kind of resonated well with private industry as an example. So, I think you gave some examples here, like TABA is a really good example. That's one of those things where I relatively recently learned about the nuance of this TA-BA TABA program as well. I don't know. I think the answer there is just we be very public about what we've done. We make sure to communicate that to the other services and agencies as well. And I would love, that's actually really good. I'll take a do out. There may be somewhere that we can post this information to the Ventures website to say, hey, any other agency that's looking to do this, here's the playbook and here's what we're calling things. Do whatever you want, but if you call it this thing, then industry will likely already know what you mean, because the Air Force Ventures program has been very well dispersed at this point throughout the startup world and throughout the venture world. And I think that kind of network effect is going to continue on. So we'll try to propagate that information more formally. Right now, it's been just very informal.
Okay, next question also is going to be for Steve. Is there a plan to bring some traditional topics back to Air Force SBIR program?
So that's a really good question. And at least in the near term, one of the things we didn't get to talk about in the SBIR program earlier, which I know we're kind of going all back to SBIR versus Accelerator, but was what we are going to call the defense track or defense only topic. So in terms of creating smaller topics, no, not in the near term. Is there the intent to bring those back? But I'll talk about a small caveat there, maybe a big one. But within the open topic, right now we have this dual use track that does very much favor commercialization, right? What we are acknowledging is that the ratio of funding in the country is about $500 billion private R&D, right? So through basic, advanced, and applied research, privately funded is about $500 billion, whereas the DoD is roughly 100 billion, right? So that's about a 20%, 80% split. So what we're going to start to see, at least for a starting point in the portfolio, is 80% this dual use track, which reflects the nation as a whole. And then about 20%, which is more of a defense track, which reflects those technologies that might be useful to us and to the Department of Defense, but not necessarily having a very strong dual use overlap, right? So this is all very new, and the rules of that program will get released fairly shortly, but I do expect that we're going to go that direction. Now, kind of to the individual topic question, we do have something within the open topic called the operator needs, and a very clear translation of the way the traditional topics are written can go into this new system is through those operator needs. So there's a website called Ideascale. I'll post into the chat here in a second how you can post those if you're in the but essentially allows any operator or acquisition person or program manager within the Air Force to say, this is a problem that I have in my mission, or a problem that I am responsible for solving from an acquisition perspective, whatever that might be. They put in some key answers to certain questions about that problem set. And then what happens is, even though this is an open SBIR topic and everybody can apply to that who has some kind of dual use solution, then all of these operator needs are essentially attached to that document. And so when they go through and apply, they can say, oh, by the way, I can solve as a company, I can solve operator need number 27. Right? And what happens is the moment you're awarded your phase 1, you get connected to that operator or that acquisition person who has the need. So we're accelerating the collisions that occur in a very deliberate way. So I would just look at the things that you used to write topics with as a really good fit for operator needs. Obviously, this is still evolving. As I mentioned, the defense track is evolving as well. There's more to come on this.
Okay, there's a whole string of questions. TIR, STTR. I am going to pop to the bottom of the list and pull some questions off and have more to do with the accelerator, and I'll have to hop back and forth and try to cover all of them. There's a question at the bottom. Can the accelerator assist with finding customers for other contract vehicles, such as an existing OTA? I will take that one. The answer to that one is clearly yes. The accelerator, our 13-week program, the whole first third of the program is what we call mentor madness, which involves us introducing every company to somewhere between 50 and 100 business mentors here in my particular case, the Boston ecosystem. And then we have 1 week that we call that government liaison madness, where AFWERX helps cultivate a list of connector type people inside the DoD. This is not just Air Force, Army, Navy, DARPA, Intel. I have provided many people to that list that Steve is keeping track of. Then we have our government liaison week, where all of our companies meet with a couple of dozen extremely well-connected people throughout the DoD. And we don't really care what contract mechanism is used. If one of my companies in the cohort wins an OTA or a classic BAA, we're delighted to help them out. I will point out, however, that I'll put a few words in Steve's mouth, in that one of the points of the accelerator and one of the points of the simplified version of the AFWERX Open Topic SBIR is to eliminate all the bureaucracy that small businesses have to go through, so they don't have to become defense contractors. Almost all B2B SaaS software companies don't want to be cost plus fixed fee labor contractors. They don't want to have timesheets. They don't have DCA audits. They don't want to have an accounting staff to keep track of G&A rates and overhead rates and all the junk that big defense contractors have to go through. So these new SBRs are designed to allow the company to continue to be a Katz product vendor without foisting all the bureaucracy on top of them. So while we're delighted to assist companies in customer discovery, if they have other different kinds of contract mechanisms, we're still trying to help the Air Force retrain itself how to buy things from Katz product companies in the same exact form that they sell to their regular customers, so that the company doesn't have to run two companies internally, essentially, a commercial product company and a defense contractor. This was one of the main reasons why small startup companies were repulsed from working with the DoD is this foreign business model that would force a lot of expenses on them. So the answer to that question is, bottom line is yes, obviously we'll help our companies pursue government business however they like. However, at the same time, this is a retraining task for the government in how to not merely presume that every little COTS vendor in the world is going to be in love with timesheets and DCA audits and voluntarily go that route. It's very, very important to understand that this has been the main reason why that sector of economy has shunned the DoD, is because of this business model part. It's extremely innovative on the Air Force's part to say we have to go to them instead of forcing them to come to us. Okay, that's the answer to that question. I'll start back up the other direction. How do we apply to this program? If you go to techstars.com, there's There's applications for all 50 of our programs there. You can pick the one you like. How might we get involved with the accelerator? Well, the best way is to apply, and then you'll now have a conversation with either Jonathan or Matt Kozlov for one of the 2 accelerators. They're in recruiting mode right now. Keep continuing up. If you are an AFWERX Phase 1 award winner who already supplies to BAE Systems, would it make sense to engage with BAE Systems FAST Labs? Definitely. I'm quite certain that Francesca would be delighted to hear from various other vendors of theirs from different parts of BAE and help them become suppliers to FAST Labs, help them remain commercial product vendors. Francesca, do you want to speak about that for a second?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Thank you for the question. So our functions, we are the tech scouting team. So our function is to, well, as mentor and supporter, help the company in the Techstars program to be successful, regardless if there is an application or not to the system products and services. So this is the first point. We want you to be successful regardless, and that's why we are supporting the ecosystem. However, if there is a specific technology of interest, or let's say that fits a certain program, so what we're going to do is connect the startups with business areas and in general product line at FAST Lab to see how the company can work together. So if it's a very early technology, usually we can insert in some proposal or program of the BAE we're working on. If it's a more mature technology, we can help to tune up the technology to become a supplier to that business area. So I think the great support and help that we can provide is connecting with our experts. We have more than 30 chief scientists. They are like professors, full professors at universities. They can help understanding the market, understanding different applications, and make the connection with systems for different applications.
Excellent. Okay. One came in the bottom, an easy one. What's the name of the program that Jonathan is running? On Techstars website. Thank you, Jonathan. What's the official name of your program?
It's called the Allied Space Accelerator, Techstars Allied Space. And if I could make one comment just to dovetail on what's been mentioned, a lot of tactical questions in this audience, which I think is great. I think it's important to recognize at a higher level, the US government and other partners are acknowledging that they have issues. And that's a very powerful step, because once you acknowledge you have a problem, then you can implement strategies to solve it. And this open topic SBIR and other elements are bringing in lots of good ideas and technologies that would otherwise just have gone on to serve different needs. And what I've found in talking with, literally hundreds of founders in probably 10 or 12 countries over the last few months, is that customer discovery from a government perspective opens their mind to many other ways to implement the current state of knowledge, whether it's AI, in space, like satellite servicing, or software or hardware solutions. So I just want to acknowledge that this is a fundamental shift in problem solving as it relates to government, and it benefits everybody, independent of whether or not you're in a Techstars accelerator. It's a really amazing opportunity.
Thank you, Jonathan. And this is a very closely related question. I think of Techstars as being relevant to software and cloud companies with agile development, demo days, and rapid iteration. Many companies selling to DRD are doing deep tech with long dev cycles. How does Techstars model work here? I'll answer that first, and then Jonathan, if you want to answer that as well. The Techstars, as I mentioned, has somewhere between 50 and 55 programs around the world. If you look at Matt Kozlov's Space Accelerator from last year's class, he has rocket motor companies and balloons that fly up into the atmosphere and fire missiles into orbit. If you look at my current class, I have a company called Mesodyne that makes a silent solid-state power generator that burns fossil fuel and generates electricity with no moving parts. I have a company that makes a drone launch and recovery piece of hardware that allows a drone to be launched or recovered while it's mounted to a vehicle going up to 65 miles an hour. I've had small missile companies. I've had 3 drone companies. So it turns out that Techstars, we have We have a basic materials program out in Indianapolis that does things like asphalt and concrete and things like that. So I'd say a healthy quarter of Techstars companies are hardware companies, basic materials, deep science sort of things around the world. If you look into the roster of Techstars companies, you'll find that there's a massive chunk of them that are not hardware. Jonathan, do you want to have anything to add?
Just real quick on that. Mine is a space-focused thing. As we know, space is hard and expensive and time-consuming, but it's very important to recognize that there are a number of tactics that you can use to de-risk technology and create value before you put anything in space. And so this is part of the opportunity of Techstars is how do you be smart with your resources? How do you create value along the way as you're building TRL, if that's the measurement you're using, or until you space qualify? But that's part of the partnership opportunities that we have. As we all know, you can create lots of value by doing, requirements definition, testing, you're qualifying, you're building TRLs, and you're partnering along the value chain. So I think we're just as good at hardware as we are at software and systems and solutions here at Techstars. So I wouldn't just put it in a SaaS software bucket.
Okay, great. So there's a series of questions here that are going to be back for Steve on the whole rebalancing of the SBIR program away from basic research, or apparently away from basic research, more towards productization, commercialization, and delivering actual products to warfighters. The first of those questions, Steve, is my understanding of the SBIR program is that the I, innovation, R, research, and SBIR were critical to the intent of the program. A 50K phase 1 doesn't seem sufficient for any meaningful research. Can you comment on the impression by many small companies?
Yeah, I think that's a really insightful comment. And so when you think about the maturity level of companies coming into this, the reality is you can still be earlier on in the process and go and thrive in this program, but you need to have a very clear articulation of your commercialization potential and strategy there. And then the other piece of this too is that, yes, $50,000 in 3 months is not a lot of time to do something that might take 12 months as some kind of deep tech bench experiment. And we acknowledge that. And that's why the purpose of phase 1 is a little bit different, I'd say, definition of research and development, in a sense that what you are doing is research into the aspects of this solution that will make it useful to your customer, right? And so the phase 1 is not necessarily about deriving some kind of technical result per se, but rather about doing the R&D and what should make your solution useful to your customer. Now in phase 2, we firmly expect for that kind of development to occur, and 1.5 million and 27 months is an amount of time that can help do that. And then in the case of the StratFi, 6 million plus is a good amount, and 48 months is the maximum time on that. So again, I wouldn't look at phase 1 in a vacuum. That is very focused on, okay, let's make sure that the R&D that we are doing is actually going towards an end that is useful to a customer and end user in the Air Force. But again, that's a very good comment. The other thing I'll point you towards as well is the SBIR program as a whole is not all pivoting to Air Force Ventures. I mean, on the Air Force side, we are, right? But there are a number of organizations who specifically focus on very early stage basic research, and they have SBIR programs as well. And let me point you as well to the STTR program, which we haven't really mentioned that at all, but we've also introduced an STTR open topic. And that's another, I think, some $100 million or so that the Air Force gets, at least, that's spent on small businesses that are doing tech transition, and it tends to be a lot earlier stage. So anyway, I would just encourage you to look at the program holistically as opposed to just in the phase 1 lens. But again, very good question.
Do you mind if I make a comment real quick on that point?
Sure.
Steve, that's a great point. For people that aren't familiar with SBIR phase 1s, and maybe most people are, it's really that market research, right? It's research about the utility of the thing, not about how to make it work. It's will people want to use it, and where should I spend my resources? Most companies spend months or years and way more than $50,000 trying to figure that out. And so compressing that in time and being essentially paid to figure out how valuable your solution is ends up making your business much more likely to be successful in follow-on efforts. So if you think of it in that way of research, it's actually a lot of money and a great opportunity.
Yeah, that's a really good point too. And what I would say is that it still is research and development in a sense that all we're doing is we're focusing that work that you are doing, again, is on those ends that are actually useful to the customer and helping to establish that product market fit.
Okay, there were a couple of questions on what's the deal look like. It's 6% to participate in the program, 6% common stock. We have the same stock as the founders of the company. Therefore, the stock gets diluted later on. For that, you get participation in the program plus a $20,000 living stipend. A lot of people think that it's purchasing 6% of your company for $20,000. It's not the way we advise you to look at it. And then we also have an optional $100,000 convertible note, whose the valuation of the company can float between $3 million and $5 million. If one can prove that that you've raised money in the past at an excess of $3 million, we'll match whatever valuation you had in your last round up to $5 million. So that $100,000 buys an extra 2 to 3.33%. The total Techstars deal, and that's voluntary. So the Techstars deal is on the low side, 6% common stock. On the high side, 9.33% blend of common stock and preferred stock. And the cash is either $20,000 or $120,000. Okay, let me go. I'm hopping around here a little bit. I apologize. I'm just looking for a non-duplicative. Let's see. Well, this is a. We have to wrap up in about a minute, and this is a little maybe a longer question. I think mostly for Steve. Doesn't requiring these type of monetary commitments, I think they're talking about the venture capital commitment and the end user customer money match. Doesn't requiring these type of monetary commitments disproportionately put the smaller businesses with fewer big industry contacts at a disadvantage? And Steve, you can start the answer, and I'll finish it up as we close out.
Yeah. So this is another one of those really insightful questions. And the answer to that is, if we actually required some type of equity instrument, it would be absolutely yes. But we don't. And that's one of those things where, I'm really glad you bring it up so I can highlight the fact that that is not true. When we think of private investment, first off, phase one, so small bets, no matching, right? Phase two, there is optional matching. Phase two, strategic fund increase, there is required matching, right? Again, it's increased signal of skin in the game. But the reality is, there are a number of different instruments that can count towards that matching. So pre-sales are a big one of those that don't have any change of equity involved. So for instance, if a major corporate or one of those big partners that you mentioned was willing to put our, IRAD or some type of research and development dollars into your solution without the expectation of getting some kind of equity, or if it wasn't a loan or anything like that, that would count for the purposes of private matching, right? So we really have 4 rules that allow something to count. And obviously look through the instructions when these things come out to be sure that you qualify with them. But one is it's got to be in cash. We don't count in-kind investments. 2 is it cannot be repaid in cash, i.e. it cannot be a loan. 3, it cannot come from an affiliate, so i.e. you couldn't invest in yourself, right? And then 4 is that it needs to be aimed at reducing the technical or commercialization risk in some way. So really what that comes down to is you couldn't just point to sales of your product and call that matching. Right, so there's some nuance there, but bottom line is we don't require you to give up equity. So it's a great question, but the answer is no. That does not artificially limit you to those companies that don't have established traction relationships.
And I'll add one little more bit to that. Most of the applicants to the accelerator are companies that have a little bit of an MVP in the commercial world, a little bit of commercial traction, but don't know anybody in the aerospace world. And that's why they come to join the accelerator for all these introductions. So, and I said earlier, 8 out of 10 of my companies from this 2020 cohort have won phase 1 SBIRs. And these are companies that are commercial product companies. Primary goal is to do commercial products. Had little to no clue about how to work with the Air Force, but wanted a little guidance, a little help. And 8 out of 10 won phase 1 SBIRs, and they have a prototype, and they're now starting to shop it around. We're trying to introduce them to all these large companies. So absolutely not as far as at least from what I've seen, the SBIR program favoring companies that have large commercial contacts already. Most of the companies that came into our program were certainly not in that position, and 8 out of 10 of them, like I said, won phase 1 this first round. So at this point, I think we have to wrap up. It's about 11:48. We're a little over time. We have our next session starts in 2 minutes. Okay.